Hello, guys, gals, non-binary pals, xenobiology team 3, and other. Welcome to the Sci Fi Lab. I'm your host, DJ Squared, and with me is my co-host,
Harper.
And with us is our special guest,
Dr. Mike Evans.
Just going to do our normal interview. Don't need to be afraid.
Not afraid at all.
You sure? You're looking a little squirrely.
Well,
You look relaxed.
I just finished the series last night, so I'm just
you
hoping
just
it's
finished?
fresh
Okay.
in my memory.
Which
So,
series?
The Broken Earth
I don't know what that
Trilogy.
is.
That's why I'm here.
That's why he's here.
Okay.
Because he needs to share it with somebody.
Yeah.
And who better than the Sci-Fi Lab?
Okay.
Seriously. Yeah, my wife does not read sci-fi and fantasy.
Seriously?
I need somebody to share it with. She would if I pushed hard enough.
Did you read this series or write this series?
I read the series. Yes.
Because sometimes we have writers on here and it gets confusing.
That sounds awesome. No, yeah, talk about dreams. Yeah, someday. But
to be able
today.
to be able to write a science fiction
Today,
series.
no, the author is N.K.Jemisin.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought we had the books in here somewhere, but I believe I was mistaken.
It wouldn't surprise me. A lot of books in here.
It'll be fun. We are in the Sci-Fi Lab, which is a science fiction library for those of you who aren't on Georgia Tech campus, or for people who are and just
Have never been here.
never go into Skiles.
Yeah.
Because there are plenty of people who don't even know this building exists. The question we ask everybody who comes on the show is,
Sure.
what was your first contact with science fiction?
Ooh, oh man! I mean, that's reaching way back. An early piece of what I would consider science fiction that had a huge impact on me was Final Fantasy VII.
Nice.
Which is, I mean, it was about climate change before anybody cared about climate change, really. And it was about eco-terrorism before anybody knew what eco-terrorism was in my, adolescent brain or anything. But
Yes, the Kingsman Final Fantasy game.
yeah. So that had a huge impact on me as a kid. Literarily speaking, I read Ray Bradbury when I was in school, and
Yeah, I think
he was big.
Fahrenheit 451 is required reading.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where it's not banned.
Right. Right. And what else was I into? I tried to read Lord of the Rings. I tried. I just couldn't get into it.
That's a mood.
Yeah.
There's two types of people. The people who tried and just couldn't get into it, and the people who think everybody else is heathens.
Yeah. My problem is I tried after I'd already watched the movies.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Yeah.
I mean, generally speaking, I know through painful experience, my rule is watch the movie, then read the book.
Mm-hmm.
See, I do the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, see, I used to do the opposite. And then I found some book movies that I could not ignore.
Mm-hmm.
My parents took me to see the second Percy Jackson movie and then decided they were never going to take me to see another book movie again.
Uh-oh.
Because I was sitting in the seat vibrating with rage.
I can imagine that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's why I read. If there's a book movie coming out and I wanted to read the book and I also want to see the movie, I will watch the movie first.
Yeah. It's harder to vibrate in rage at a book.
Well,
Yeah.
no.
And if the book is the source material.
Well, it's not it's just as easy to vibrate with rage, but you don't feel there's not as much rage because this is the source material.
Right.
And also, you're not irritating anybody else if you're vibrating with rage.
That's true.
Breathing loudly in the theater.
Yeah.
Panting.
Yeah.
Going full on anime, just rage
Yeah.
monster.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it.
I don't think I've ever gotten that mad at a movie. And if I have, then I just stopped watching.
When you're in a theater, it's harder.
I left, I want to say it was the most recent Mad Max, because I just could not handle it. I thought it was the most weird movie. I didn't know anything about it.
Yeah.
And so I was not
never
expecting
saw
it's gritty, grungy,
Yeah.
intense. And I'm saying, this is not my thing. I'm just gonna
Yeah. I heard
bolt
it
here.
got good reviews, but the trailers reminded me of. Are you guys? This is a terrible reference, but are you guys familiar with Tank Girl?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like Tank
Yeah,
Girl
see, that was the
like,
vibes. That was the vibes I was getting.
Yeah.
Honestly.
From Mad Max. I mean, it's basically it's
yeah.
a very similar in spirit like movie to Mad Max. It used to come on. I think it was Comedy Central when I was a kid.
Wasn't it also
Probably
like a comic
edited,
book
but,
or something?
Yeah.
Yeah. It was like a TV show based on a comic book, and it was.
Yeah.
You know, in that genre of going to be at least a little bit bad.
Yeah.
Because comic book to anything is a really hard transition.
Right.
For some reason.
Right. It comes and goes, you know.
Yeah.
I'll get deep into an author. Like I read like 3 Philip K. Dick books in a row, and then took a break. And this is like me coming back from the Philip K. Dick phase.
Yeah.
Now with the Broken Earth Trilogy. So
I mean,
it comes and goes.
that's fair.
Yeah.
So what type of science fiction is the Broken Earth?
So, and I'm not as familiar with kind of the genre classifications, but it's debatable, I would say, whether science fiction is maybe the best word for it.
Speculative fiction?
Yeah, speculative fiction is typically what it's called. There's an element of magic to it. There is an element of things being alive that are not necessarily alive in our world. But there's science fiction to it in that kind of within this fantasy world, there's a lot built up in terms of like jobs and phenomena that kind of follow naturally from the sort of fantastic world that's built up, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Science fantasy. It's a genre.
Yeah, cool. There it is.
Like, science fantasy, that's like the whole Star Wars is science fantasy.
Yeah.
Even though some people will get angry if you say that. It's the truth.
Yeah, actually, that resonates because the Force is kind of the same.
It's magic.
Yeah, right.
It's magic.
Right.
What is the midichlorians thing? Is that what they explain the Force with? Dr. Yasek likes to rant about it. That's all I...
Okay.
There you go.
Like, I've never actually seen Star Wars.
I forgot. I don't know why I asked you.
Wow.
See, I can...
Oh, this should be a running gag on your show.
See, no, like...
Every show there should be a Star Wars reference.
I know enough about Star Wars that people forget that I've never seen
forgot.
Star Wars.
I see.
We're an odd pair because I've seen, like, almost no science fiction. I loved the Stargate series.
Oh, yeah. Cool.
They've never seen it.
Yeah.
They've never seen Star Wars, but I've never really watched that much Star Trek. I don't know. We do a sci-fi podcast. We don't know anything about sci-fi.
We don't know. Like, we took some science fiction classes. It's fine.
Exploratory.
Yeah.
It's more of a speculative fiction podcast, but we had to keep the branding intact.
Of course.
We're in the actual Sci-Fi Lab, so we gotta
keep the space owners happy.
We had to keep the branding intact.
Keep the space in that.
That, and I was on the original radio show. So.
Right on.
Oh, here's a question that we never ask anybody.
Okay.
Is there something you absolutely feel like roasting?
Something I absolutely feel like roasting from the books.
Just from anything science fiction.
Something I absolutely feel like roasting from science fiction. Ooh.
Like something you just can't stand and you just want to go off about it.
Well, I was ranting a bit about this last night or / this morning because I was reading some interviews with N.K.Jemisin kind of in preparation for this, and she talks about Star Trek and the fact that like I was never really into Star Trek and I didn't really know why. It all seems so implausible to me, and one thing that interviews with her made me realize is that like it paints this egalitarian picture of like the future in space where like anybody can work on the Enterprise, but then you look at like the racial makeup of the people on the Enterprise and like who the heroes are, and this was like what, 1960s, 1970s, so of course it was like this, but like the optics of the makeup of the Enterprise are nowhere near what it would actually look like if it was actually an egalitarian situation. That bugs me, and that's part of the reason I realized I never really got into Star Trek. It also seemed very random to me. There was no overarching narrative. There probably was, but it annoyed me that it took you had to like get into it for like 15 episodes.
Mm-hmm.
And you watch the first 15 and like the first 5 are incredibly boring, but for whatever reason somehow you're like hooked. And then once you're hooked, you just keep watching, and then all of a sudden it's not the kind of show that you could like jump in the middle of. Like I can't just turn a Star Trek episode on in the middle because you have no idea what's going on.
Yeah. You have to watch all of the episodes all the way through, but it is a very Monster of the Week style.
Yeah. I'm not a fan of that. With X-Files, I always liked the overarching storyline and never like the random vampires and Mulder storyline.
Yeah.
See, like, I'm a little bit of both. I like Monster of the Week every once in a while. That's why I, kept going back to like Scooby-Doo or something. Very formulaic Monster of the Week. You can just turn it on and do other things, or you can just sort of, it's just a fun decompression type of thing. So
feel good formula. You know the formula, you know what you're gonna get, and you get it. And sometimes that's okay. Yeah, absolutely.
But no, I can see where you're coming from with the egalitarian society thing.
Yeah, because it's, I don't know.
Roddenberry tried his best.
Yeah.
He was very much ahead of his time.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
Like Kirk was supposed to be a woman.
No way.
Yeah. Originally,
would have been better.
Yeah.
What happened? The network probably.
Yeah, the network was like, no. That's
leading female. That's a no from us.
That's a no from me.
Typical.
Yeah, like that's the thing is, I believe the original, like the original way Captain Kirk was written. Well, first of all, Kirk wasn't the original captain. It was Pike, and Pike was supposed to be female, and then they switched that. But yeah, it was supposed to be even more progressive than it was. Poor Roddenberry.
What can you do?
He was doing his best.
Yeah. What can you do?
All right. So now on to the main event. Is like, do you have any recommendations for our audience? And we know this answer.
Yes. So I'm here to recommend the Broken Earth Trilogy by N.K.Jemisin.
Give us your plot synopsis.
My pitch for it?
Yeah, your
plot synopsis. Okay, good. Yeah.
Plot synopsis, elevator pitch, whatever.
Spoilers ahead, you know?
Yeah, this is your only warning.
Okay.
You click out now if you don't want spoilers, because this is, all right, we're going to give you like 3 seconds.
I'll try to keep them to a minimum and kind of give warnings within.
We're going to give you 3 seconds of silence, and then you go.
So let's start with the setting, right? So the setting is Earth, obviously, and Earth is effectively a character in the series. So, and that actually has meaning to it on a deep level that we'll come back to later. But the Earth is basically broken. So now, divide the Earth into 2 hemispheres. On one side of the Earth is a massive supercontinent. It's called the Stillness. And on the other side of the Earth is nobody knows, because nobody, quote unquote, lives on the other side of the planet. And on the Stillness, you have one super city at the center of the continent called Eumenes. And effectively what has happened is, because the Earth is broken, there are no nations, there is no overarching government. There is Eumenes and these smaller groupings of people called comms, which are sort of like towns.
Eumenes and everybody else.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
And there are comms of various sizes all over the continent of the Stillness. And on the Stillness, there are 2-ish types of people. There are kind of ordinary humans, and there are people called orogenes. And orogenes have the ability to commune with the Earth. So they can do things like move rocks, and control water and control the movement of molecules in the air and things like this. But
yes, the Avatar.
Yes, yes. What they're actually doing though is moving energy around.
Yeah.
And so there's a price to pay, right? That like if I want to use
so
energy,
alchemists.
If I want to use energy to do something as an orogene, I have to take it from somewhere. And so what they'll do is they'll pull it from the Earth, but they can also pull it from other human beings. And when they do that, the people they do it to turn to ice.
Because you're sucking out all the heat.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So the normal human beings are called stills, kind of derogatorily, because they can't move energy the way origins can. And the kind of natural order of things and the stillness puts the stills are basically in charge, and origins are viewed as inferior to stills and are feared and in various ways corralled or just killed outright. I mean, you got to remember there's no overarching like authority. The only way in which they're legitimized is through this organization in Eumenes called the Fulcrum, where they will take in origins from all over the continent and train them to control their powers. And then they kind of contract out the origins to various parts of the world to control natural disasters, right? So you think, the earth is broken, so like there are open volcanoes, just spewing lava. There are earthquakes constantly and tsunamis. Every natural disaster you can think of is happening on this supercontinent. And so the fulcrum origins will kind of go around and make sure that people don't die in the various communities where these things are happening. So the story follows this woman throughout her life, all the way from childhood through adulthood, and she is an origin. So it starts out with her in the calm where she was born. She gets taken to the fulcrum. Her parents effectively give her away because origins are so feared that even the parents are like willing to give their kids away to the fulcrum to make sure they're safe effectively. And she goes to the fulcrum. She gets a different name at the fulcrum, and so it's an overlapping narrative where you see her as a child and then her at the fulcrum and then her as an adult. Something happens between her time at the fulcrum and her as an adult where she's changed her name again. And the book opens basically her as an adult. Her son has just been murdered by her husband because the husband found out the son was an origin and was not a fan, as you might imagine.
Yikes.
So he killed the son and he absconded with her other daughter. And so she goes out and tries to hunt down the husband and the other daughter to basically rescue the other daughter. There's a favoritism situation going on there. So that's kind of how the novel kicks off, and then it fills in all the backstory of basically what's been going on in the stillness. So every couple of centuries they have what's called a season, which is basically a long period of horrible conditions, catastrophic climate change, volcanoes spewing ash into the air everywhere, and like ridiculously cold temperatures and all this. And humanity clearly manages to survive the seasons, but a lot of that is due to the work of like the fulcrum origins and things like this. So the first book is called The Fifth Season. It follows the main character as an adult as soon as she tries to find her daughter, and you hear about how her as a child, her name was Demaya, gets sent off to the fulcrum, and how Demaya integrates into the fulcrum and becomes, I'm going to mispronounce her name, but I think it's Cyanite or Cyanite. All the fulcrum names are like plays on geological terms, so there's a lot of geology involved in this. And yeah, eventually what happens is they figure out that the reason the seasons are occurring is because humanity managed to jettison the moon away from the earth. So take it or leave it. So
I'm just wondering why humanity decided to do this.
So it's explained in the series.
Okay.
In the second and especially in the third book, you go back in time to basically the height of human civilization, when they were able to control the Earth's energies. What you figure out is that orogeny, being an origin, is really like a specific application of what the series actually calls magic. Like, that's the term for it.
Nice.
Yeah, and it's the like,
we don't have any zombie movie shenanigans here. Like, everybody knows magic is magic.
Right. Like silver energies are involved. You know, it actually reminded me a lot of the live stream from FF7.
Nice.
If anybody's a Final Fantasy fan, but yeah. So what happened was humanity got so good at controlling magic that the idea was that they were going to tap into the Earth's core, which is like the origin of magic, and use it as an infinite energy source. But they required people to do this, the precursors to Origins. And those people essentially rebelled, and in rebelling, they were basically like, screw all y'all, we're gonna mess your world up by jettisoning the moon away from Earth. So there was a rebellion, essentially, that happened. And that triggered the first season, and ever since then, what you find out is that rather than being jettisoned outright, the moon has been, instead of going around like this, it's a podcast, I know you guys can't see, but I'm making a circle. It's been
instead of going around normally.
Yeah, making a massive oval. And so every time the moon gets close to the Earth, again, you get another season.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
nice.
so it's about Esun's journey to basically capture the moon back in the seasons. And the daughter gets involved because the daughter has become so disillusioned with everything she's seen that she just wants to slam the moon into the Earth.
Wait, the daughter who's with the father? Or
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ends up, spoiler alert, killing the father.
Good.
Yeah, turning the father to stone.
Good.
And yeah, so there's a lot. There's a lot
there. Now we don't have time to unpack all of that.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack in the whole series. But you know, the broad arc is it's an allegory. And it's a beautiful allegory for the experience of African Americans in the United States. I mean, you can just leave it there. You can map Origins. Actually, if you're listening at home, spell Origin backwards, and you'll figure out what you get. And what to even say? Basically, they're ostracized and feared for no reason. And the thing I find beautiful about it is that, like, you realize if they were truly integrated into the society, it would be so much a better place, because people with the powers to withstand and even end the seasons are so feared and ostracized that they feel obliged to go into hiding. You can look at the fulcrum as something like the prison system, where they're kind of yoked and their powers are contained and they're used for purposes that, you know, serve the state. And there are moments where the author kind of jumps out of the narrative to talk about justice in ways that would resonate with anybody who lives in the modern United States. And it was fun reading the ebook, because these are the moments that are, I don't know if you guys read Kindle books at all, but the highlighted, the highlighted.
And you see who else is highlighting things.
And thousands of people have highlighted these passages where she's talking about the characters and the events in the novel, but you could take that snippet of text out of the book, throw it up on a slide about modern America, and nobody would know the difference. Which
you put it in a journalism article.
Yeah.
And no one can tell.
Right.
Which is both great and terrible.
Yeah. So it's, to me, it's a beautiful allegory. You know, as somebody who's not a person of color too, like, to get inside the head of a person of color, you realize immediately, like, the story from their side, from their perspective, in a way that is harder, I think, when you're talking about actual experience, which is weird, right? I mean,
it's a great tool
weird.
for fiction. Is a great tool for empathy, just because it allows you to depersonalize things.
Right.
If you don't have a specific face to put to something, it's easier to swallow. I guess. Right.
So that is pretty much the series in a nutshell, and I won't spoil the ending. The big conflict is basically, will the world be destroyed outright, or will the world be saved?
High stakes game.
Yeah.
Well, that was the Broken Earth Trilogy, and that was the Sci Fi Lab. Thanks for listening.